Hello, my name is Orient Person. I am a Doctorate of Nursing Practice student at the University of North Florida, and I will be presenting for you information on caregiver burnout. Within these slides, we will start with the introduction and progress on through the literature review, CRAP tests, future directions, the role of the NP, and I will leave you with an overall conclusion. Introduction. As we all know, caring for a person with a chronic disease can be quite stressful. In particular, providing care to those with specific chronic diseases has proven to be more stressful than others. When you consider providing support to those that have neurodegenerative diseases such as Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, Huntington, muscular sclerosis, etc., these particular caregivers are at high risk for experiencing burnout. These are progressive diseases, and as the disease progresses and the client gets worse, the caregiver burnout also heightens. Caregiver burnout is defined as the physical, mental, and/or emotional exhaustion experienced when caring for another. This burnout can cause a shift in the attitude of the caregiver from positive to negative, which will see the caregiver result to social isolation, have symptoms of depression, anxiety, some physical illness, and an overall poor quality of life for the caregiver. As a result, the care recipient is also subject to poor outcomes and even death. Looking at the literature review, when I did the search within the university library, there were not very many original articles relative to caregivers of dementia patients that were 5 years old or less. There were several literature reviews, but not that many original articles within the last 5 years. However, I was able to come across a very sound article that consisted of 6 authors, and of them, they were all geriatric psychiatrists and neuropsychologists. They too found that the prevalence and predictors of caregiver burnout was limited as far as the research, so they conducted a cross-sectional study on caregivers of those diagnosed with dementia. Their goal was to discover any correlation between the different dimensions of caregiver burnout and the demented patient's clinical characteristics and socio-demographics. In their article, they classified caregiver burnout into 3 different dimensions: emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and reduced personal accomplishment. With the emotional exhaustion, this consisted of a decreased or absence of energy and enthusiasm, resulting in the draining of the caregiver's emotional resources. The depersonalization was the development of an indifferent, impersonal, or cynical attitude between the caregiver and the recipient of care. The reduced personal accomplishment is the perception of one's work as negative. So basically, not taking any pride in being a caregiver and actually seeing it in a negative light. Within this research, they took 145 caregivers as well as 145 patients. These particular caregivers were were aged 18 or older, and they were caring for a patient that was diagnosed with dementia at least weekly. What I found was most of these caregivers were women and had adult children. They were required to fill out the Maslow Burnout Inventory, which scores the dimensions of burnout. The Beck Depression Inventory, which rates the severity of depression. The Beck Anxiety Inventory, which rates the severity of anxiety, as well as the Socio-Demographic Questionnaire, which collected data such as their age, their health status, their marital status, etc. The 145 patients that were included in the study were all patients for the Center for Alzheimer's Disease of this particular university in Brazil. And these particular patients were assessed with the mini mental exam, which evaluates cognitive function, the functional activities questionnaire, which evaluates their activities of daily living, how well they do those, the neuropsychiatric inventory, which rates the 10 different behavioral issues such as delusions, combativeness, etc., and also the clinical dementia rating scale, which basically rates the severity of dementia. They can be at a no disease or healthy, which none of these patients were, or mild, moderate, or severe disease. Of these caregivers that were screened, 81% of them reported sadness, anxiety, insomnia, fatigue, irritability, and or wish to die. Of that number, 23% were being treated with anxiolytics, antidepressant, herbal supplements, and or mood stabilizers, and the anxiolytic that they were using in abundance was Xanax. It was noted that there was a high correlation between caregiver burnout and dementia patients that had delusions. It was also found that when looking at treating patients with dementia, caregivers' mental health must be addressed. When the CRAB test was performed, this article was good. It scored a 43 out of the overall 50 that could have possibly been scored. And the breakdown was as follows. In section 1, this requires input on the currency of the article. And being that there was not an abundance of original work within the past 5 years on caregiver burnout, this article is current and it was quite relevant. This is an original published article and can be found in the Journal of Brazilian Psychiatric Association. There are no current revisions or updates at this time. The only reason why I did not give this particular section a perfect 10 was that there are no links within the article or the reference section that could have provided additional access to other resources. So I gave that section an 8. Section 2 scores the relevance of the information provided within the article, and a perfect 10 was given. The information was relevant and the researcher was able to confirm the answer to her question regarding caregiver burnout. Again, this research was conducted by geriatric psychiatrists and neuropsychologists. The information provided was to enlighten professional and informal caregivers. Multiple sources were reviewed, but they were not original articles that could be used. And I would recommend this as a source to be used for research. Section 3 scores the authority of the source. I gave that section a 9 out of 10. All but one of the authors was either a medical doctor and held a doctorate of philosophy or both. Current employment at the time of the research was provided on each author. The contact information, both the physical and email address, fax, and phone number were also provided. There was a DOI provided. This article was taken from the EBSCO host and a link was provided directly to the PDF file. So no URL, but the DOI was there, so you could put that in and it would take you straight to this particular article. Section 4 scores the accuracy of the content. and that particular section was given an 8. The content was reliable. These researchers conducted the study and provided a very detailed statistical analysis of data. The tables within the article were provided within the article to further display the findings. And this article has been cited in similar articles related to caregiver burnout and burden, and there was no overtone of bias noted. There were a few typographical errors and some problems with grammar, but again, this was probably related to a language barrier and the translation, as this was a Brazilian study. Section 5 scores the overall purpose, and I also gave that section an 8. The authors acknowledged that there's not a lot of research done to evaluate the correlation between familial caregiver burnout when caring for those with dementia. As in any research, after identifying the problem, a hypothesis was created, and the results provided were facts pertaining to the population screened. The sample was comprised of a group of individuals being treated by the authors at a specific facility. No control group or data from any other geographical region was provided. There did not seem to be any institutional bias, but being that all the authors worked in the facility where the research was conducted, it was likely more of a convenience to select only from patients that received care at that particular facility. So with that, the article was given a 43. Future direction in the DMP role. Caring for the caregiver needs to have some priority to help with better outcomes for both the caregiver and the patient. It was found that caregivers that were provided social support, professional caregiver services, and informal support from friends and family reported a decline in symptoms that led to burnout. As the DMP, we can help caregivers understand and recognize symptoms of caregiver burnout, because this will be essential in impacting the current problem. One particular study identified that caregivers will often not reach out for help, and likewise some caregivers are reluctant to relinquish their caregiving duties. However, as the professional, we have to be willing to assess and then also offer help in that area. There is a program that is called REACH, and it stands for Resources for Enhancing Alzheimer's Caregiver Health, and it's designed to address the needs of the caregivers of those diagnosed with Alzheimer's. The local one actually in Florida, the base is out of Miami, but there isn't a lot of support groups that are like in local communities within the state. However, there's a phone support system where you can call into REACH, and so using that as a resource for our caregivers that are treating those with dementia can also give them a link of social connection of people that can relate to what they're going through. For the conclusion, we have to understand that caregiver burden is a real issue, and it affects both formal and informal caregivers. Research has shown that this burden can lead to health problems, as discussed in previous slides, as well as cause fear of being a caregiver. Taking care of any patient that has a chronic disease can be stressful, and those that are providing care to patients that have neurodegenerative diseases such as the Alzheimer's have increased rates of burnout. Providers need to be purposeful in making caregivers aware of their risk, and also be willing to provide holistic care when caring for those with dementia. I hope that I have enlightened you in some sort, and you will be proactive in making sure that we care for our caregivers that are caring for those that have dementia.